Hi, I'm Michael Kurosh and welcome to Design Santa Barbara. This week we are in Santa Barbara Design Center and I'm joined by noted Santa Barbara historian and author Erin Graffy, who will be sharing the fascinating history of Santa Barbara invention. Thank you very much for attending our show.
Well, thank you for having me. This is very cool.
Wonderful.
Beautiful place here.
Thank you. I love your books. There's so many books and you tell me it's just half what you have
about
written?
half of it, but these are, I was thinking of pretty books because this place is so beautiful, so I wanted the ones that would kind of go along with the decor here.
I bet you not only they're pretty, but also full of information about Santa Barbara.
Great information, because this town is, everywhere you look, there's something to write about and something to know about. It's just such fabulous history.
I love this town. I call it paradise, and that's the reason we are here. Let's not tell everybody that.
That's right. Keep it quiet. We don't want other people to know.
No,
or else if you come in as a tourist, you know, that you will just wear the big red T for tourist, spend your money here and then leave, and then just save it for the rest of us. I think that would work out really nicely for the economy and everything else.
Sounds good. So tell us a little bit about the health aspect of this town that maybe a lot of people don't know. Everybody looks fit, everybody looks healthy, and you mentioned few inventions that happened in Santa Barbara.
Well, yeah, that fits right in because, you know, the place is beautiful. So you think of coming here because the weather is so climate, it's so temperate, it's perfect degrees, it's sunny all the time. You feel like you're athletic, you're exercising. So it seems like this should be a good place for people interested in health. But even beside that, there's all the sort of scientific healthness, if we could put it that way. And one of the very first things that Santa Barbara was known for was a health resort, health spa. We could actually go to the 19th century when they had the Hidden Valley Veronica water, Veronica Springs water, which was considered very medicinal, and people came out for that, or for the hot springs in Montecito. But after the turn of the century, in 1920, something very, very interesting happened that was really mind-boggling in the health field. And that was, well, let's take a little trip up north to Canada. The researchers there, Banting and Best, doctors Banting and Best, who had uncovered or discovered or put together insulin for diabetics. And they were freely, very interesting, they were freely sharing all of their research, which of course now you want to have a patent on it. But here in Santa Barbara, there was another doctor, because, you know, usually it's not one person researching on something on the health field, there'll be a number of people. And a wonderful man named Dr. William David Sansom, as in Sansom Clinic, was here, and he was hot on the topic to find a cure or fix for diabetes. At this time, diabetes was type 1 juvenile onset diabetes, meaning you were insulin dependent. So it wasn't type 2, but the prevalent, everybody had it if you had it, was type 1. And it was a death sentence. So if it was juvenile onset, you probably would not make it to adulthood.
Wow.
So Dr. Sansom's hot on the trail. The doctors in Canada, you know, isolate insulin and figure out this is what's going to do it. But here, because they shared that, their formula, so to speak, Dr. Sansom took that and improved on it. His chemist figured out a way to, I'm probably describing this in the most basic, unscientific way, but made it how it could be more long-lasting in the body. Otherwise, you would be taking your insulin perhaps every hour, every 2 hours, but now it could last longer. And when he did that, this was here in Santa Barbara, the first place that insulin was manufactured and administered to diabetic patients. And as soon as that news hit the wires, hit all over the United States, people flocked to Santa Barbara to be treated by Dr. Sansom and receive this life-saving insulin. Now, a little corollary to that was his chemist was a Lebanese man, Dr. Sayoun. It was a very young guy, very intelligent, very smart. Got his doctorate degree, not in medical doctor, but, you know, a PhD. And he stayed on in Santa Barbara, and he had a little boy. He and his wife had a little boy, and the boy would take swimming lessons down at the plunge here, down on Cabrillo Boulevard. And, you know, kids going in the pool, they get little eye infections, so you keep running to the pharmacy. It was Caldwell Pharmacy to get a little something for his eyes. And finally, the father, being a chemist, says to the pharmacist, what's in this, you know, prescription that he's taking? Is it stuff that we can get over the counter, so to speak? And so the chemist there says, pharmacist says, well, yeah, you know, this, that, and the other thing. So the father says, I could probably make my own mix and use it for my son. And from that, he developed and commercialized it, and we know it as Visine.
Visine.
So the Visine eye drops, created and started here by the guy who was also working on insulin with Dr. Sansom.
That's an amazing history. Actually, millions of people are affected, and just think about it. How many Visines have been sold worldwide up to date?
That's
and
right.
Developed in Santa Barbara.
And here in Santa Barbara. So I guess because it's so beautiful here, you want to see clearly, and so. But it's just this kind of a nice story of just, you know, right here, and his kid is swimming in the plunge down on Cabrillo Boulevard, and that's where you get these inventions.
So the other story that you were going to tell us about was actually, which is interesting, is the Ferragamo.
Yes, again, so so here we are in Santa Barbara. It's looking good. We're looking good. We're healthy. We want to be well dressed. And so that would take you to clothes and shoes. And of course, all kinds of companies today that have started in Santa Barbara, Sarah West and Big Dog and Deckers and UGG and shoes and all of these sort of bits. But actually, our fashion statement was made back in, well, really the teens, the late teens. And there were a couple of brothers that came here from Italy, the Ferragamo brothers, as in the Ferragamo shoes. They had a little front store on State Street, I think near Carrillo. And in those days, you would go there for several things. You would have your clothes cleaned. I don't know that it was dry cleaning like today, but whatever, they would clean your clothes. You would have a tailor, so someone who would sew or adjust the clothes, and if possible, somebody who worked in shoes. So all these brothers had their specialty, and Salvatore Ferragamo, back in Italy, I think he had an interest early on, and he made shoes for his younger sister when she was going to receive her first communion. So I think even as a teeny bopper, he liked the idea of design and clothes. So here they were in Santa Barbara, and he's making shoes for the actors and actresses who are with the Flying A studio. And the actresses say, "Ooh, these are nice shoes." And they'd come back and say, "Could you make something a little more special for me?" And so he starts, you know, adding an extra piece of lace and bow and whatever have you. And so he starts getting a following. And it was around the early 20s that he then moved down to Los Angeles. And of course, we know what happened thereafter. His business really took off. And Ferragamo shoes is still going, you know, almost 100 years later. To almost exactly 100 years later, come to think of it, from when they came to Santa Barbara.
Which is amazing. Again, you go to Florence, that's where one of the places you go visit is Ferragamo store. And here it is, starting our beautiful Santa Barbara.
We started it, so just next time you're there, just let them know, well, you know, you didn't start it here.
Yeah, that is new. So we learned about the health aspect of Santa Barbara, we learned about fashion. It's a big town for aviation. There's a lot of contractors, there's a lot of aerospace companies here. Maybe you explain to us a little bit about that.
Well, that's fascinating. I have spoken on for different clubs about our aviation history. To kind of back up a little bit, the very earliest aviators, when they're flying around, were coming to Santa Barbara, which I find quite astonishing, because Santa Barbara was so small, remember, for so many years, still small compared to other cities. But we had some very famous aviators, for those who are into aviation, Didier Masson and Lincoln Beachy. And this would be like 1912. They're here doing a show in aviation for Santa Barbara, and the population here was maybe 10,000, 9,000 people. So you think, what drew you to Santa Barbara? How did they come all the way to Little Santa Barbara? And also in Santa Barbara at this time, there was a couple of brothers. Their mother was a writer for the local paper, and they loved aviation. So it was a lot of people tootling around and trying to create their own flying machine, as it was known as. And they were Scottish, Irish actually. Luged was sometimes how it was pronounced. And they got together an aircraft, and they took it to the Panama Exposition up in San Francisco, 1915. And are offering rides for people for $10. Well, $10 was a lot of money back then. But from that, they collected so much. It was a 10-minute ride, I think, for $10. And people were like, whoa, going up in this machine, going all over San Francisco, you know, seeing what it looks like from the air. And they raised enough money to come back here and start manufacturing more planes. Interestingly, a plane couldn't be flown from Santa Barbara to San Francisco because the planes didn't have that long of a range. So they'd have to disassemble the plane, put the fuselage and the wings on a train, ship it up to San Francisco, and then shipped it back down here. But they did start making their planes here. And they had a young guy that was out of Santa Barbara High School that was interested in design, and he was helping them as they're kind of like an engineer designer. His name was Jack, and he used to watch the seagulls on West Beach and would get ideas for how to design the plane based on, you know, how the bird balances itself. Well, to cut this longer story short, these brothers decided to change up the pronunciation of their name, because when you look how it was spelled, it was too awkward. And they moved to Los Angeles to continue their building of their airplanes, and we know them as Lockheed. And so that started here. They built a little story connecting back to our Flying A studio. They built the F1, first fighter plane, and it was christened by one of the stars from the Flying A studio. Her name was Mary Miles Minter, but she was only 16, 17 years old. She was underage, so instead of using a bottle of champagne, it was grape juice. So, and they officially launched that plane. And by the way, that young boy that was helping them, I shouldn't say young boy, he was a young man.
Jack?
Jack was Jack Northrup. So he went down to Los Angeles and he started his own aviation bit. So we have a lot of that fascinating start early on with aviation in the very early years, but continue on pretty much for the rest of the century. Of course, we had the great era of the 1970s where we had the Super Guppies, those planes that look like something like a very pregnant tadpole. It looks like a whale. And you're thinking, there's no way this thing could get off the ground. My father was a pilot. That's how we came to Santa Barbara. He was a test pilot, and he was heading up General Electric's missile systems, testing systems here on the West Coast, and came in here. And my father would always explain, well, an airplane can go because of speed and thrust, and the air over the wings helps more than the air under the wings. But for those of us who are not in aviation, we go, there's no way those things can fly. No way something that heavy can fly. But he had lots of interesting stories that then tap into our Santa Barbara history. He was flying some people, and I can't remember what the reason was that they were here, but he was their pilot. And they were staying at a place called Hidden Valley Ranch. We have a couple Hidden Valley areas here in Santa Barbara. We have one in Montecito, and we have one off of Modoc, Las Positas area. But the other one is when you're going up 154, and you don't have to get way the heck up there, but you see that the road kind of goes down as you're heading up, and you can see a pool there. That's Hidden Valley Ranch. So my father's taking the pilots there, piloting the people there, and would go to pick them up and stay for lunch. And they would serve the salad with this amazing salad dressing. So everybody is wondering, you know, what is this? It's the people who own the place. That was our own invention. And then he started saying, could I take some of this home? And I guess probably the other guests there. So they start packaging it up, and this stuff was just absolute wonderfulness, and bringing it home. I was a little kid who didn't want to eat my vegetables, even my salad. But once they brought home the Hidden Valley Ranch dressing, man, everything could go down. And of course, then it did become commercialized. They sold it to a big conglomerate. But I tell you, those of us who have had the original, even the really good stuff that you make from the packet, which is much better than when you get it bottled, as you all know. But the stuff that was the original, it was that much better. So there you have it.
So Hidden Valley Ranch is started actually right in the mountains of Santa Barbara.
Right here. So it's our own Hidden Valley, exactly.
I have had a few of those pounds extra in my belly, so yeah, I know. Delicious stuff.
Just to show you that Santa Barbara has good taste and good tasting things, right?
Well, that's true. That's absolutely fascinating. When we come back, we will have a lot more to discuss. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. There is more Design Santa Barbara after the break. On this edition of Michael's Minute, I would like to talk to you about mid-century modern furniture. Mid-century modern is described as the period between 1933 and 1965, in which designers such as Eames and Nakashima used clean lines and futuristic materials to propel design into a post-war era. At Santa Barbara Design Center, you can see and feel a variety of mid-century inspired furniture, including our signature leather chairs and recliners with classical wood frames. Accent them with side tables, daybeds, ottomans for a slick, artistic look. Customize these pieces to fit your home perfectly. To bring mid-century modern style to your home, please visit us at Santa Barbara Design Center, 410 Olive Street.
Welcome to Rugs & More. We provide the West Coast with the most comprehensive collection of new, oriental, and antique rugs. Rugs are solid art investments and often become cherished family treasures. Our limitless inventory will warm up your home. Exotic or traditional, tribal or modern, our rugs weave stories through intricate patterns, compelling colors, and touchable materials. Number one in Santa Barbara for over 20 years. Visit us today at Rugs & More, 410 Olive Street in Santa Barbara.
Welcome back to Design Santa Barbara. We are joined by author and historian Erin Graffy, who is sharing the history of Santa Barbara inventions. Very welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
It's fascinating what all you know. That's amazing.
Well, you know, it's such an interesting town that you just have to scratch a little bit and you see something that's so interesting. And as a historian, I feel like it's pulling a thread. You know, you see a little thread and you start to pull it and thinking but you keep pulling and pulling and finding more and more.
Becomes chains and becomes heavy duty ropes. So anyway, it's a beautiful town and the architecture is just amazing and it looks so cohesive and so nice together. Maybe you tell us about that a little bit.
Well, you hit on something here because it is a beautiful town and we do have amazing architecture. For a small town like this, you can see so many examples of every kind of architecture, not just, oh, we're in California, so you have ranch houses, but you know, you have Victorian, you have colonial, you have the Spanish Revival, and that's what we see a lot in our downtown area. That's kind of an interesting story. You know, when you think of 19th century American, you think the Victorian, the wooden buildings, then you come into the new era, 20th century. Well, the wooden buildings, Victorian, they're so old-fashioned. So here in Santa Barbara, downtown, you want to have the beautiful the new century buildings, built of brick and looking sleek and looking nice and modern and clean and not all that wooden fussiness. Well, brick does have that look, and it does do all those kind of streamlined things. But one thing it doesn't do well is it doesn't sway during an earthquake. So at the end of June in 1925, we had a big earthquake, and the parts of the city that were the most damaged was downtown Santa Barbara, because everything was made out of brick. Brick doesn't sway. Down it went. The homes that were hurt because you'd have a brick fireplace, a brick chimney, so that if it went through the roof or fell, most of them, they just lost the chimneys, but you know, it might fall in the house, or things inside the house that would fall over and break, a bookcase full of your beautiful china. But really what was hurt was downtown Santa Barbara. But Santa Barbara has the most educated, sophisticated, fascinating people that come here because it's beautiful, because they want to be here as artisans. So that to be said is here we have the earthquake, and it was about 6:35 in the morning around that time. And by that afternoon, even though you had this obliteration of the downtown area, you had City Hall and city leaders having a meeting that afternoon to decide, what are we going to do? How are we going to rebuild? They didn't wait a couple days and the shock of the disaster, boom. One of the things they came up with was the Architectural Board of Review. And this was the first in the country to have an ABR, Architectural Board of Review, here in Santa Barbara. And one of the things they had, it had been a kind of a discussion after the First World War across America of having these kind of revival styles of architecture, harking back to Britain or France or Italy. And in Santa Barbara, because of our roots here, we would say Spanish Revival. So that was sort of what we're going after with the red tile roof and the white stucco walls, and that became sort of the template for how you would rebuild their downtown Santa Barbara. When I do history tours, sometimes on the Condor Express off in the ocean, and you're looking back on the city, and I say, now you can see Santa Barbara has their own Great White Way, and when you're on a boat and you look back on Santa Barbara, you see all of State Street is white because of the Spanish Revival, white stucco walls, red tile roofs. So we have our, like Broadway in New York, we have our own Great White Way. So that was part of it, but you know, we have other subtle things that come into our ABR and our design. And when I was a kid growing up here in Santa Barbara, my parents would always say, oh, you don't know what a beautiful city you're living in. And of course, a kid doesn't understand that. They think, you know, a pretty dress, a cute guy, you know, but you don't think of, you know, a beautiful city. Until I went away to school down in Los Angeles, and then I understood some of the other things that we have under our very strict, sometimes uncomfortably strict, architectural board of review, such as there's no pole signs. And there's no large signs, there's no neon signs in the old part of Santa Barbara. We have a height limitation. So the Granada building, which is our skyscraper, all of 9 stories high, but that was built before the earthquake and survived the earthquake. And so that's why they said, okay, that's going to stay, obviously, so that's grandfathered in. A little interesting thing about the Granada building that I love, the man who built that built it from one of those mail order kits, like how to build a big tall building. He had never built a big tall building, but by God, he built a big tall building. And it was the Granada. And after the earthquake, it was still there and it didn't fall down. So you're thinking, if anything should have come down, there's a great big building. So he took ads out in the local papers saying, see this beautiful building I did, the Granada, so you can trust all of your building needs to me, Mr. Erin, and I think it was very successful here. So. And one other thing, no golden arches are allowed in Santa Barbara. Too commercial, so you don't have the standard brands, big signs that go around the building, and you can have McDonald's here, but none of the golden arches are allowed in the city.
Oh, so. I didn't know that. So also continuing with that, I understand the breakfast menu got a little bit addition in Santa Barbara.
Yes, isn't that fun? So Santa Barbara, a lot of food coming out of Santa Barbara, but one of our, probably our most famous, Herb Peterson, and he owns a number of franchises for the McDonald's restaurant. And we have a lot of working people here, working class, blue collar, getting up in the morning, going on the job, and sometimes didn't have time for breakfast at home, want a quick something. And to serve them, he came up with his own idea. And he put an egg in a little template, so it was nice and round with Canadian bacon, and put it in the muffin, and invented this breakfast hamburger, so to speak. And he thought, you know, this is going really popular here. I wonder if I can get official permission, and it might be on the McDonald's menu. So he has the head of McDonald's, Ray Kroc, and says, come out here, I want to show you something. Well, Ray Kroc says, well, just tell me, what do you want? But Herb Peterson knew Mr. Kroc very well to know that he probably, if he just heard about it, you know, some people have to see and taste it. That's just how they work. And if he just heard the idea, it wouldn't come across the right way. So he kept insisting, no, you have to come here, because he didn't want him to say, nah, we're not going to do it. Mr. Kroc comes out here. He gets served his Egg McMuffin, and that's how the Egg McMuffin became part of the McDonald's chain of breakfast food. People used to say to Herb Peterson, oh, well, you must have made a lot of money on that. He said, nope, I made no money. If I only had a nickel, just a nickel for every one of those things, probably now just a penny for every Egg McMuffin ever sold, he would have been a kabillionaire, or, you know, something. He would have had more money than that.
Well, that's fascinating and very interesting, all these stories you have. So I see you have beautiful books, and you would love actually for our viewers to get to know you a little bit better. How can they purchase your books and get to know you?
I have written a number of different books on Santa Barbara. It's just, like I said, a great place, great photographs. Back over here, we have the Santa Barbara Yacht Club, and that's the waterfront history of Santa Barbara. And Old Spanish Days, which has won a number of history awards and book publishing awards. I'm very proud of that. And of course, every year we have our fiesta, but it's based on the Rancho period that people know very, very little about. And I thought it was such an interesting period that I did a book on that. And remembering Giordano's, many of the old timers will know they used to have grocery stores, so it's a history of the whole company. You're sort of thinking, would that be so interesting to read about somebody's store? But it's actually the history of Santa Barbara, but through a grocery store. So how things changed, how people would buy food, it was very different 100 years ago compared to now. You're just thinking, well, no, you just go in and take it home. No, very different. And the ones that I'm probably best known for, not so historical, but cultural, which is the How to Santa Barbara series. They are extremely serious compilation of everything about Santa Barbara. As you can see, it's about a quarter of an inch thick. But we make fun of everything in Santa Barbara, so it's...
That's wonderful.
So it's fun. It's fun. And those are available in local bookstores or through the publisher, Kieran Publishing, Kieran online. I think also through Amazon.
Excellent. This truly has been an amazing look at some of the most interesting inventions to come out of our beautiful Santa Barbara. I encourage you to read Erin's books and learn more about history that makes this community so fascinating.